people have been domesticating animals since ancient times. Animals like horses, goats, and cows, as well as many others. But what if these animals were to be released into the wild? What would happen to them? Would they survive? And how would their behavior change? Sure, no one would do that on purpose, but there's one place on Earth where, by the will of fate, it did happen. There are also rumors that real mutants live there as well. The accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, which occurred in 1986, is regarded as one of the largest of its kind in the entire history of nuclear energy. Unlike the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the explosion resembled a very powerful dirty bomb. The main damaging factor was the radioactive contamination. The clouds from the burning reactor carried various radioactive materials across most of Europe. After the explosion, everybody was evacuated, and a 30-kilometer exclusion zone was created. Today, its surface is an open radioactive source. Many animals died immediately after the disaster, as they interacted with highly irradiated objects, such as the debris from the fourth power plant, which scattered several kilometers from the explosion site along with radioactive dust. The forest near CHNPP was also affected by radiation. It got named the Red Forest because under the influence of radiation, the pine needles changed their color from green to rusty within 30 minutes after the accident. During the post-accident decontamination, the affected trees were pulled out by bulldozers and buried, but there's still a strongly increased background radiation in some areas. However, a number of scientists note that 30 years after the accident, in the absence of people, the exclusion zone has become a kind of reserve in which rare species of animals live. At the same time, there are sources that claim that mutations have been seen in animals living there. For example, they mention the catfish living right next to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. They inhabit the waters of the CHNPP cooling pond and the diversion canal. Some of them were about 5 meters long. Rumors spread that these catfish were mutants, but is it so? After the Chernobyl accident, scientists and dosimetrists fished in the ponds and the rivers of the zone. The fish was very radioactive, especially those that lived in the silt and fed on other fish. Many years have passed since the disaster, but huge catfish continue to live near the Chernobyl NPP. They also have an accumulation of radionuclides inside them, so it's forbidden to catch them unless it's for science. These catfish have grown so big not because of radiation, but because they're left alone, and thus they get to live a long time and reach these enormous sizes by the end of their life. Moreover, they're also well fed. The thing is that these smart fish live in the Chernobyl diversion canal, which is located between the dining room and the working part of the nuclear power plant. All station workers love to feed the fish. Most of all, the Chernobyl catfish loved sausage and boiled meat. So, the catfish at Chernobyl are not mutants. They're just so smart that they can even be hand-fed. After the Chernobyl disaster, a number of scientists expected to see a boom in mutation in nature. Radiation causes many diseases, but an increase in the birth rate of mutants hasn't been observed. The only thing that showed signs of mutation was a few trees in the Red Forest. But ordinary people wouldn't even be able to notice. Today, the exclusion zone around the Chernobyl NPP is gradually turning into a reserve for wild animals. It is now a unique area where most of the territory is covered with dense vegetation and inhabited by hundreds of animal species, including those listed in the Red Book. Here, you can find foxes, wolves, deer, hares, wild boars, and many other species. In local swamps and dense forest thickets, rare endangered species of birds found their home. Eagles, owls, black storks, white-tailed eagles, lynxes, badgers, and otters listed in the Red Book found refuge in the Chernobyl rivers, far from people. Scientists noted that the exclusion zone had favorable conditions for wild animals and brought over Przewalski's horse in 1998 from the Eskania Nova Biosphere Reserve. The Przewalski's horse is the last species of wild horses on the planet. They were exterminated by humans in their natural environment in the 12th century and are listed in the International Red Book with on the brink of extinction conservation status. It was the only wild population of Przewalski's horse, which at the time had 20 individuals. The conditions of the exclusion zone had a positive effect on the horses, and they've already increased their internal population numbers by several times. Today, Przewalski's horse of the exclusion zone is one of the most interesting objects for research, which scientists always keep their eye on. But unfortunately, the exclusion zone doesn't save the animals from their main enemies, poachers. Horses also fall victim to them once in a while. For example, in early December 2019, unknown persons installed trap loops made of metal cable, which a fowl and an adult horse got caught in and suffocated. Overall, Przewalski's horse successfully settled in Chernobyl, and thus, there are some important lessons to be learned from this. It proves that Chernobyl became a haven for wild animals in the absence of people. This fact should make us think about the impact of human activities on natural ecosystems. When there are no people around, the fauna thrives even in conditions of radioactive contamination. As noted by the BBC in 2014, scientists placed 42 motion-activated video cameras in the contaminated areas. Subsequently, they noticed that some deviations in the health of animals are still observed. Albinos are more common among birds. The life expectancy of animals has somewhat decreased, and rodents have less offspring. However, the high background radiation doesn't seem to have a detrimental effect on flora and fauna. It appears that in the medium term, the presence of people and the products of their vital activities have a much more negative effect on wildlife than a nuclear disaster. Animals aren't the only ones who live in Chernobyl. Over 1,000 people live there as well. These are the power plant employees, shift workers, and scientists. There are also self-settlers living in the exclusion zone, people who refuse to leave the contaminated territory and their homes. As of 2017, there were 84 people living in the zone. They are usually elderly people that live in abandoned villages of about 10 people. However, there are also people who live alone. So what did scientists find in Chernobyl that surprised them so much? It was a herd of wild cattle, but where did they come from? As it turned out, it was the cows left behind after the death of self-settlers. They became wild and adapted well to the new living conditions. All animals are in good condition. The cattle handle the snowy and frosty weather well, says the Chernobyl Radiation and Ecological Biosphere Reserve on its Facebook page. Scientists say that this herd differs from domestic cows and that it is structured, has integrity, and always works in harmony. Besides, wild animals are more careful about guarding their young, and the calves themselves choose the safest place in the herd between the adult bull and the cows. According to the researchers, the young are also well adapted to living in the wild, so it seems that the animals really don't need people at all. On the contrary, they feel great without us. Do you think you'll be able to live without animals in your life? Without your lovely pet crawling up next to you every day and night?